Hi gang, we're going to keep working on test 2. So what we're going to work on now is finding the values of trigonometric functions given some data. Alright, so let's look at what they're giving us and what they're asking us. So we want to let theta be an angle such that sine of theta equals to -3/5 and cotangent of theta is greater than 0. And once we figure out that, we're then going to evaluate the tangent of theta and the secant of theta. Okay, so the first thing that you have to focus on is figuring out what quadrant you're in. So if we start with sine theta equals -3/5, what's significant here is that sine is negative. What's significant here is that sine is negative. So what two quadrants is sine negative? So let's start with that. So it would be quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Okay? We're not going to use both these triangles, but I just want to start here. Do you know where the sign is negative? Now, if you've sort of forgotten this, I went over in lecture the mnemonic. All students take calculus, and I told you where the trig functions were positive and negative depending on the quadrants. Sine is like a y, it's positive up, negative down. Cosine is like an x, it's positive right, negative left. So tangent is positive on the diagonal up, negative on the diagonal down. So, and then the reciprocal functions have the same plus or minus. So meaning if sine is negative, cosecant's negative. If cosine's positive, secant's positive. If tangent's negative, cotangent's negative. So when we say that the sign is negative, we're referencing that it's negative in 3 and 4, and we don't want 1 and 2 because there it's positive. So we start there, finding where the sign is negative, but we also want the cotangent to be positive. Now, if you're not sure where the cotangent is positive, then you can think of its reciprocal function, which is the tangent. So if you know where the tangent is positive, you also know where the cotangent is positive. So the tangent is positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. So you need the triangle where both of these statements are true. Okay, so that means that we're not going to use these because here the cotangent is positive, but the sign isn't negative. And here the sign is negative, but the cotangent isn't positive. So the only triangle where both of these statements are true is this triangle here. All right, so once we figure out what quadrant we're in, we can then use the trig function to write the sides on the triangle. So for instance, if sine theta equals to -3/5, sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So it's giving us two sides of the triangle. So here's theta. The opposite side is across from it. So the opposite side is 3. The hypotenuse is always across from the 90. The 90 is here. It's the longest side. And that will be 5. Now, I gave you numbers that are easy, but for instance, if the numbers aren't easy or not easy, then what you would do to find the third side is the Pythagorean Theorem. So let me just do it with you so that we're on the same page, because if on the test they give you numbers that are a little hard to calculate, you know how to do it. So the trig function will give you two sides. You find the third side either because you recognize a triangle, it's like a 3, 4, 5 or 6, 8, 10, something like that. And if it's not obvious, then you calculate it. So the Pythagorean Theorem is your a squared plus b squared equals to c squared. The leg squared plus the leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. C has to be the hypotenuse. So this is 5 squared. Let's say we have 3 squared and we're looking for this other side. This one might be obvious to you, but I want to work it out so that if it's not obvious on the exam, you can figure it out. All right, so then I move the 9 to the other side. Then I take the square root, and we don't put a plus or minus because we're dealing with a magnitude here. Okay, so this side will now be 4. So this is a 3, 4, 5. And if you need me to write this out, this is your opposite, this is your hypotenuse, this is your adjacent. So we use the first information to create the triangle, then we evaluate it whatever they ask. So now they're going to ask us what is the tangent of theta and what is the secant of theta. Now I would suggest the first thing you do is figure out the plus or minus. The plus or minus, you're in quadrant 3. So the tangent in quadrant 3 is positive or negative. What do you think? Good. The tangent is positive in quadrant 3. And the secant, is that positive or negative in quadrant 3? Remember, the secant is a reciprocal of cosine. Cosine is negative on the left, positive on the right. So this is going to have to be negative. The tangent is positive because the tangent is sine over cos. Both sine and cos are negative in quadrant 3, so it's negative over negative, which is a positive. The tangent is asking for what two sides? What two sides do they want? They want the opposite over the adjacent. So you go to your triangle and you find the opposite over the adjacent. So the opposite is 3, the adjacent is 4. So the answer to the first one is a positive 3/4. Now let's do the secant. The secant is the hypotenuse over the adjacent. So the hypotenuse is a 5. The adjacent is a 4, and again it's negative because it's in quadrant 3. So these are the two answers that they're looking for. Alright gang, I'm already over 6 minutes, so I'll end this video here, but I'd like to do another one of these with you, so I'll pick up another video on this topic again. Hope you enjoyed the video. Catch you. Bye-bye.